Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to another interesting workshop on cybersecurity titled Enforcing Privileges Security on Endpoints to Minimize the Attack Surface and Mitigate the Risk of Data Breaches. The workshop will focus on understanding effective security measures that safeguard the digital assets, maintain productivity, and mitigate security risks in today's evolving threat landscape. This will be followed by a demo on the importance of enforcing the privileged security on endpoints to minimize the attack surface and mitigate the risk of data breaches. Now, I would like to hand over the workshop to Mr. Prasad Deore from DSCI to set the context of this workshop.
Thank you so much, Yash. So when we were deliberating about this workshop, especially DSCI and NASCOM and CyberArk, each one of us was coming to a cliche, security is at an inflection point. But this cliche is actually a reality. The number of devices, type of devices, location of devices, the type of data, volume of data, speed of data, so many variants to deal with. On the top of it, the pandemic definitely gave a boost to the data that is being generated. If you look at traditionally, we had boundaries, we had trusted zones. Today, those boundaries has blurred, especially if you're working from home, working from field, the kind of devices you are using, the kind of devices that those are generating the data. And that is definitely changing the definition of what is trusted and what is not trusted. It is also the reason that we wanted to deliberate on the endpoint privilege management solutions. Well, again, the regulatory landscape has also become very, very important in this whole security and privacy regime. The data protection laws are being enforced across globe, including the recently passed law in the parliament, the Digital Data Protection Bill. So it is causing a whole lot of transformation in the ecosystem. And that's why we thought that we will deliberate on enforcing the privileged security on endpoints and how it can minimize the attack surface and mitigate the risk of data breaches. So today we will discuss how to implement effectively the security measures, controls to protect your digital assets without impacting your productivity. We'll also have a demo on how important it is to enforce privileged security on these endpoints, how we can implement intelligent controls for privileged access management, how organization can proactively monitor and control privileged activity, track credentials, and identify and respond to suspicious behavior. For this, we would like to invite Manshu Bansal, Solution Engineers, CyberArk. Manshu Bansal has a bachelor's degree in technology from IIT Mumbai and has over 15 years of experience in the technology industry. Manshu, without further ado, I would like to hand it over to you. I hope audience would enjoy this workshop and gain a lot of knowledge from this workshop. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Manshu.
Thanks, Prasad. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Yes, can you confirm if the screen is visible?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. As introduced by Prasad, my name is Manshu Bansal, and I'm a part of the go-to-market team solution engineering at CyberArk. And today, on behalf of NASCOM, I'm excited to host this webinar on enforcing privileged security on endpoints to minimize the attack surface and mitigate the risk of data breaches. The key highlights from this session will be: 1, understanding the market needs and implementing effective security measures that safeguard digital assets, maintain productivity, and mitigate security risk in today's evolving threat landscape. There will be demonstrations on the endpoint security value drivers and how, by implementing intelligent controls for privileged access management, organizations can proactively monitor and control privileged activity, track credentials, and identify and respond to suspicious behavior. We will also have a hands-on on how to install, configure, and deploy such solutions, case in point, using CyberArk endpoint privilege management solution. And finally, have a look into the identity security maturity model report by Enterprise Strategy Group, which will prepare us for developing a strategy and culminate in a program roadmap that sets the direction for the identity security initiative and leads to advanced level of maturity. So before we begin, let's understand what endpoint security means. When an attack evades the perimeter and endpoint security, they steal credentials to elevate privileges and move laterally through your network to find valuable information. In this case, enterprises are reliant on detection technologies to react quickly to try to prevent and spreading it. Hence, endpoint originating attacks can be devastating and range from disruption to extortion. But increased investments in traditional endpoint security has failed to reduce the number of successful attacks. The reason is simple. Attackers benefit from missing fundamental controls as companies focus on implementing non-essential controls. Securing privileges and identities on the endpoint are more critical than ever. Endpoint privilege security on the endpoint reduces the attack surface area, which is a fundamental part of the security program, and hardens desktops, laptops, and servers, resulting in low risk of a breach and potential damage to the business. While it is possible to accomplish some of these without specialized tools, it is worthy to note that organizations have to deploy such solutions without impacting productivity and enforce privileged security on the endpoints to block and contain attacks. Let's understand the forces why fundamental endpoint security is a must and the solutioning thereof. We go to the market and customer needs in the first section for the agenda today. To understand the market needs, we are referring to the 2023 Identity Security Threat Landscape Report, which represents the findings of a worldwide survey across private and public sector organizations of 500 employees and above. And it is conducted by market researchers in early 2023 among 2,300 identity security decision makers. The recent economic turbulence is having substantial effects on cyber resilience, as well as the more obvious headlines impacts on jobs, profit, and ongoing operations. In 2023, short-term actions will compound levels of cyber debt, where security investment lags behind broader business initiative is starting to catch up with the organizations. Layoffs and churn have affected industries, not just tech, but retail, finance, and others as well. 68% of security professionals say that they expect security issues as a result. But the pace of technology adoption has not ceased. Identities will more than double in 2023, nearly half, whether human or machines with sensitive access. And virtually everyone, 99%, expect some kind of identity-centric compromise in 2023. So these global trends are applicable to India as well. From the organizations in India we surveyed, we found that with the growing number and types of identities, 67% of the organizations lack a complete picture of human and machine access to sensitive data. In India, these identities will access 39% more SaaS applications in the next 12 months, which is at a lower rate than the worldwide. And that is because India has a larger number of SaaS applications per organizations than the rest of the world. And finally, 91% of the organizations are expecting a negative impact from adoption of AI tools. Generative AI tools, which have opened a Pandora box of unprecedented technological possibilities across industries, are particularly a security concern. Cybersecurity researchers have demonstrated numerous ways AI could be used maliciously, such as creating polymorphic malware or writing highly convincing phishing emails at scale. Financial hardships, uncertainty, and inadequate cybersecurity investments create a perfect storm for ransomware. In the software-led world, the supply chain are increasingly intertwined, making it feasible for attackers to compromise multiple supply chains in their entirety to increase their ROI. In 2023, threat researchers definitely identified a cascading supply chain attack for the first time. Still, 56% of the organizations have not taken any steps to further secure their supply chain in last year, as they're still in the designing and refining stage of their DevOps journey. Consider the impact on insurability. 42% of the organizations got a 2023 cyber insurance policy at a higher premium than the last year. And not to forget, credential theft has always been an attractive target for adversaries. Rapid digitalization makes credentials compromise even more alluring for creating a virtually endless supply of identities to the target. And we don't have to look any further than our favorite media source, dark reading, New York Times, info security, and what have we. Here are a few where attacks on privileged accounts, which are often thought of it as a traditional admin accounts. But as we discuss on prior webcasts, then we shadowed administration that lurk among regular users. So the 2023 Identity Security Threat Landscape Report details the most critical areas of risk for organizations in 2023 and demonstrate how identity security strategies built on zero trust are being put into practice at forward-thinking organizations. These are people, workforce appeal, machine identities, business systems, software development, and identity security toolsets as the areas to be worked upon from a zero trust perspective. We would like to discuss with you today the idea that is kind of get dismissed a lot as common sense, but often does not get acted upon. And the idea is that to be secure, we must unprivilege the attacker. If there is one critical takeaway from this session, we would like it to be that the key foundational endpoint security and identity controls are critical for security, but are often missing. And what we mean by foundational endpoint security are identity security, access management, least privilege, and application control on the endpoint. These alone can give a very high level of protection against ransomware. The approach has been tested by solution providers over more than 3 million samples of ransomware. And according to this test, the stack was 100% effective against these ransomware samples. There is a critical misconception around endpoint security. And that misconception is that if you place an agent that protects against different kinds of malware, viruses, worms, trojans, fileless malware, ransomware, you are going to be pretty safe against the data breaches. In this picture of the world, attackers are assumed to be low privileged. This is almost never the case, because if they are indeed low privileged at the moment, their first step will be to gain more privileges by the time they are ready for encryptors and extract the data. At that point, they are already gained enough privileges. They have been literally moving, and they have been setting the stage for the maximum impact. They have been elevating their privileges, and the case in point, the hearings of EDR solution breach that we have recently witnessed. The EDR vendor CEO, when asked why there was no alarm for 11 days, and he said, well, basically, the attacker achieved admin rights and admin access to the machines, so they just offloaded our EDR agent, so nothing really we could do. And this is the biggest miss in the endpoint security. Not that our tools are bad, they are just not designed to defend against the privileged attacker. And that's the gap that we want to help you close with our fundamental endpoint security solutions. So the first pillar that we have been hearing is to understand what privileges are given to a user. We need the privilege on our side to achieve our business goals and have to work with privilege. We just cannot remove privileges from the day-to-day IT life. However, the privilege is a double-edged sword. Privilege impact on the area of attack is tremendous. You know offshore about the Windows vulnerabilities and that are non-exploitable from the get-go if attempted as a standard user. The impact of privilege on an organization's security depends on how you choose to approach it. You can pretend that there is nothing you can do, or you may choose to actively manage privileges. You have got to acknowledge the prevalence of privileges and also your dependence on it, but also attackers' dependence on the same privileges too. So these tools for fundamental endpoint security, the topic for today, allows to remove local admin rights and maintain the least privilege. And maintaining it is very important because we often see organizations that were able to briefly achieve the least privilege, but then gradually return to the privilege sprawl and creep. So we provide the right management tools and also policy audit capabilities with these solutions. With that, we ensure that the least privilege remains the active state of an organization IT. Attackers are aware of organizations trying hard to balance security and operations. With endpoints, there are more users, the bigger attack surface. They're easy target, less concern about security despite constant education. And there lies the key, the high value returns. Let's look at the strategy of these attacks and go more into the technical aspect of the fundamental endpoint security to understand the problem. A typical strategy to protect endpoints is where each of these layers of network firewall, intrusion prevention, etc., harness different technologies and are usually presented as an end-to-end defense in depth approach. Now let's forget right now that they're based on protecting a perimeter that does not exist anymore. Let's focus on what the real problem is. And that is that they are all reliant on detection of known bad. And that's either by signature or behavior. And our key part of that was known bad, making them hit and miss against the targeted or zero-day attacks. And I'm not saying that detection technologies do not play a part, but they only deal with one part of the problem of the cyber attack chain that they are frequently evaded. How much damage is done when an attacker gets through is determined by how good your foundational security is. To illustrate further, let's look at the attack chain in detail and see more effective ways to disrupt it. The first step, it is the reconnaissance. The customer can do very little about this, except maybe educate their users not to broadcast information that can easily be weaponized, that's more difficult than you might imagine, and the information that their security teams would consider confidential are frequently published on social media and professional networks. As an example, if an attacker wants to know what security tools you used and who in the organization would be a good target, likely to have admin rights, they wouldn't need to go much further than LinkedIn. There, they will find a list of all employees, their job role, and a list of their qualifications and skills. Skills in FireEye, CrowdStrike, Microsoft ATP, etc. So very quickly, they have a list of all targets and likely defense mechanisms. The next step, then they move to weaponize the intel and test it against the technologies you use. and all without knowledge and without any alerts going off. The aim is to craft an attack that will mitigate your security controls and evade detection. And this is how they consistently prove they can touch an endpoint, and why most companies have adopted the stance of assumed breach today. Step 3, important, is the delivery stage. And this is where detection technologies largely sit. All of your security investments are riding on tile number 3 today. Step 4, step 5, and 6 is the most of the damaging stages and enable attackers to reach their end goals, and very few organizations are able to tackle this problem. And the answer is because it's seen as difficult, and many organizations don't even attempt unless it's forced upon them because of a breach or due to some regulatory compliance. And it does not have to be hard though. With the right product, the right advice, the right fundamentals for endpoint security, like least privilege, role-based access, where unknown applications are blocked. It's not a pipe dream, but it's a journey, and it starts with the first step somewhere. If we list out all the attack vectors from stage 3 to stage 6 in the last illustration that we saw of the cyber attack chain and the corresponding mitigation technologies, based on what we see here, detection technologies like EDR are very effective against known threats such as signature or behavior based. And this is where the likes of EDR shines best. We also notice further down the attack chain that there are multiple attack vectors that are left unhandled as a whole. It seemed that we could enhance our existing strategy by identifying mitigation to these attack vectors. For example, how do we prevent lateral movement within the organization? How do we prevent the local admin or the domain admin credentials from being stolen from the endpoints? These are some questions that we need to answer with the foundational endpoint security solutions. And the answer to remove these barriers lies in enforcing least privilege and allowing organizations to block and contain attacks at the endpoint, reducing the risk of information being stolen or encrypted and held for ransomware. A combination of privilege management, targeted privilege threat protection, and application control stops and contains damaging attacks at the endpoints of entry. Unknown applications run in a restricted mode to contain threats, and privilege threat protection blocks credential theft attempts. And these critical protection technologies or fundamentals are deployed as an agent to strengthen all and harden all the desktops, laptops, and servers. The fundamental endpoint security solution enables the security teams to enforce granular least privilege from the IT administrators, helping organizations effectively segregate duties on Windows servers, for example. Complementing these privilege controls, the solutions for fundamental endpoint security also delivers on application control, designed to manage and control which applications are permitted to run on the endpoints and servers that a organization IT team are managing. So with this, we have covered that there is a continuous increasing threat landscape on the endpoint. Multiple attack vectors like social engineering, email, application exploits, fileless malware, etc. are left unhandled as a whole. Instead of boiling the entire ocean of deploying cybersecurity solutions, which can be challenging and complex, fundamental should be focused, which is kind of getting dismissed a lot as common sense. But we but often does not get acted, and increased audit requirements is also are some of the requirements which organizations have been asked today. So all these form a premise of laying the market and customer needs to deploy the foundational endpoint security solutions in any organization. So let's explore these fundamentals in more detail in the next section. Remember that endpoint security solution works with already authenticated user. So essentially, this is the last line of defense for privilege defense. Now that the user is already authenticated, we still want to flexibly define what they can and what they cannot do on the endpoint. This will be, of course, different from organization to organization and roles. And flexibility of the solutions allows us to define what's safe, and we can control the impact from malicious actions through the combination of least privilege, application control, just in time, credential defense, protection from ransomware, and privilege deception. While EPP and EDR solutions focus on behavioral aspects of ransomware, foundation solutions monitors access to sensitive data by applications and can stop pretty much any kind of data corruption. Doesn't matter how the attacker was able to get to that point. They're not able to execute the final stage of the attack, which is the impact, with these tiles of privilege defense as the fundamental. Let's go to the second section of the agenda, wherein we understand the endpoint security value drivers and what are on top of mind topics for the IT security teams to enhance the endpoint security. And the value drivers are delivering measurable cyber risk reduction to protect against the leading cause of breaches, compromised identities, and credentials. It's enabling operational efficiencies by reducing complexity and burden on IT from identity security solutions while improving protections of the business. It's also about enabling the digital business by improving business agility to deliver great digital experiences that balance security with a frictionless user experience. And finally, satisfying audit and compliance to deliver on extensive compliance requirements for many regulators and frameworks. Let's look at how the endpoint security enabled delivery for each of these value drivers with the demonstrations of the solution, post which we'll have a hands-on as well. We start with the first value driver, which is deliver measurable cyber risk reduction to protect against the leading cause of breaches, compromised identities and credentials. The techniques, tactics, and procedures used by bypassing security controls continue to evolve at a rapid pace. Web-based applications have become essential to life and work, and our web browsers, which seemingly know everything about us, are our prime targets for credential stealing and session hijacking attacks. In fact, threat actors stealing malware commonly target browsers to compromise stored credentials and session cookies as the recent trend. Although this has been a common practice for years, the adoption of SaaS services have made browser-based attacks more prevalent than ever. Like updating passwords on regular basis, clearing web browser cookies is a cyber hygiene practice neglected by most of us. If hijacked, these cookies enables attacker to bypass multi-factor authentication and single sign-on security measures and gain access to the critical business applications and data. These threat actors can use these techniques as a jumping point to deploy malicious code and social engineering and further carry out the attack. Credential theft plays a major part in this attack. So in this demonstration, what we are seeing is a malicious application landing on the endpoint when executed is able to extract all credentials and very easily can export it to a file, which exposes all the credentials of business applications that was saved on the browsers based password managers. So when these malware applications are executed, it is very, very easy, and these are easily available today to initiate a attack on the endpoint to steal credentials from the browsers. Now, in this example, what we are seeing this, all the credentials of this particular user, because of this application, an attacker was able to extract and very easily do a harm to the business organization. So advanced protection helps an organization detect and block attempt theft of Windows credentials and those stored by popular web browsers. By enabling policies to safeguard browser stored credentials, any malicious application like the one in the previous demonstration will not be able to successfully execute credential theft on the endpoint. On the screen, what we see are the policies which can enable the protection against browser stored credential theft. And these policies, when they're pushed onto the endpoint with an agent-based approach, they are locally saved on the endpoint. And via a lightweight agent, as I said, provides protection against tampering with the agent itself, which stores these policies. Browser stores credentials and credential stores compromise. Credential theft from IT applications, credential theft from remote access tools, suspicious actions by any of the application, Windows credential harvesting, and many more. So credential theft blocking technologies restrict access to credential stores on the local machine, be it internet browsers, operating file systems such as local security authority subsystem service, LSASS, what we call, or third-party applications such as WinSCP or VNC. And by enabling policies for these blocking of credential theft, here we see that all the policies on the endpoint automatically detect and block the attempts to steal credentials from web browsers, password managers, single sign-on solutions, and other programs. And not just blocking, it will also give you an audit trail of wherever these policies are triggered and the applications that it has been able to safeguard against protecting your IT environment. The second value driver for enabling operational efficiencies is by reducing complexity and burden on IT from identity security solutions while improving the protection of the business. Now, in this demonstration, we are seeing a user, Jeff, trying to establish a RDP connection to one of the Windows server and workstation. However, since the user does not have the right set of credentials, the connection fails. This is because Jeff not having the right access or is not a part of the remote desktop group. So we are going to create a just-in-time policy for Jeff. We select the target workstation for this policy to be effective, select only the user Jeff so that it does not apply to all, define Jeff gets promoted to which group, and save and push the policy onto the endpoint. By creating these policies, they are automatically syncing to the endpoint, or they can be pushed via a forced push from these solutions to apply these policies in real time. And right now, when Jeff will perform the RDP again, this time Jeff can do the RDP successfully onto the Windows server. Now that Jeff wants to perform an application install that requires admin rights, because just in time only puts Jeff into the remote desktop group and does not have the rights to perform the install. What is happening now is that Jeff makes a request since he is not able to do the install by himself, he is now making a request through the endpoint security solution dialog box. The user request is captured within the privilege management inbox, which goes to the administrator of this foundational endpoint security solution. The user request is received, and the same way we created a policy for Jeff in the short while demonstration earlier for granting him access to RDP. We are going to repeat the same process, this time allow Jeff to install the application, for example, TeamViewer. With these configurations done from the user interface, it's not a burden on the IT team to learn. Just understanding the solution is enough. And now with these policies being pushed, these dialogue box will start appearing saying that notifying a user that Jeff policy has been enabled for the just-in-time enforcement. Now, Jeff is right now a part of the local admin group on this Windows server, and he will be able to use his credentials to perform a TeamViewer installation. So this way, we are safeguarding by providing blanket rights to the admin group of a user, but creating just-in-time policies only for the respective set of applications or actions which we want to use for a user to use in a elevated mode. And once the policy expires, because these policies can also be pushed from a time frame perspective, rather than having a permanent Windows or a local admin right access, they can be windowed. So once the policies expires, the users can also get a notification and get removed from the local admin group. Within the policy audit aspects of such endpoint security solutions, we can track all privilege activities performed by Jeff when the just-in-time policy is effective. For example, the additional execution of the command prompt in the admin mode, and hence driven operational efficiencies. This approach also eliminates the need of providing blanket local admin rights to the user for a period of 1 hour, 2 hours, which is somewhat a standard practice followed by fewer companies today, and then later on trying to solve the problem of identifying all actions done by a user during this 1 hour of admin access, which this particular user enjoyed. Extending the objective of the foundational endpoint security, safeguarding the login to the endpoint using risk-based multi-factor authentication secures the entire organization, applications, VPN, workstations, Mac, Windows endpoints, virtual desktops, and Radius servers as well. Like in this demonstration, multiple methods of authenticating a user on the endpoint can be given to the user, including a pure passwordless method of logging in using a QR code based approach. With contextual information such as user risk, location, device, and the time of the day to determine which authentication factors to apply to a particular user in a particular situation. Hence, adaptive or risk-based multi-factor authentication adds security with lesser hassles by strengthening the access controls with adaptive secondary authentication. Secure authentication by eliminating reliance on passwords with a broad set of authentication factors. Protect everything by securing the entire enterprise to reduce the risk of security breaches, and simplifying the user experience by limit challenges to risky accesses request based on context and behavior. So the foundational endpoint security also includes adaptive multi-factor authentication, which uses artificial intelligence to intelligently assign risk to each access event. This is an extra layer for device, network, and user behavior context by deploying dynamic access policies. To quantify on the benefits of securing the endpoints with operational efficiencies, 90% of the organizations employing contextually aware automation can quantify reduced IT efforts and costs. And there is also a 74% reduction in unauthorized user accessing business applications when behavioral biometric authentication is adopted. We are currently seeing an increase in ransomware attacks against organizations, especially now that most of the workforce is working remotely. It is more important than ever to start using ransomware protection as soon as possible and maintain business as usual without user interference. Ransomware is widely known to be one of the, even though it has been around since 1989, it's managed to become the fastest growing type of cybercrime during the pandemic times. Dynamic ransomware attacks can quickly spread through a company, impairing the user productivity and disrupting businesses. The first step in the fighting against ransomware is to expose it and to explore the different strains, what they have in common, and what it is that makes them unique. So in this section, we are observing an unknown application that is required to run and created a payload on computers on LAN. This application, malicious in nature, is able to create the payload now. Endpoint security solutions should detect this event and should provision to create a policy for ransomware protection by allowing us to enable monitoring of all accesses to internet, intranet, and optionally restrict access to these resources. So in this demonstration, what we are seeing is that these foundational security solutions are able to detect this as an event. Now, policies can be pushed for these unhandled applications, which could be a potential ransomware, by restricting their accesses to internet, intranet, with the controlled access policies, putting their accesses as restricted in a restricted mode, enabling monitoring of network shares, and optionally restricting the end users and system capabilities for these network shares, monitoring and restricting access to file folders and registry keys on the end user computer, as well as defining the monitoring settings for accessing memory of the processes currently in the system. So with these policies in place, now these unhandled application will not be able to generate a payload going forward. To mention again one of the statistics, top 2 zero trust practices include endpoint security and identity management, which are responded by 92% of the identity security decision makers. They also want the ability to correlate this endpoint security data, which is a key enabler in integrating the ability to connect these multiple point solutions. And that is where today market is expecting these solutions to integrate with the other solutions like identity and access management, single sign-on solutions for the overall endpoint security. And can all be achieved by integrating these security solutions with other tools like your ticketing systems, as well as external threat intelligence tools like VirusTotal, NSRL, which we are also going to see as part of the hands-on today. Built-in tools today often weaponize for fileless attacks, which we would have heard in many of our conversations about fileless attacks, and in an approach that is referred to as living off the land. And this allows an attacker to bypass traditional application controls, as the applications being used will be whitelisted. Your users legitimately lead them, And so an attacker is also able to misuse them. By invoking context, we can prevent built-in tools as well as unsigned unknown applications from being executed by applications that are commonly exploited, in this case, the content handlers. So what we are seeing in this demonstration is a text file being opened by Notepad, which is the right content handler. But if any other application, which is not defined as the right content handler, tries to access this, these applications should not be allowed to encrypt these files. Now, in this case, what we are seeing is an example of Mr. Ransomware as an application which is able to do a encryption of the files and hence execute a ransomware attack on the endpoint. It is able to encrypt the files. Ideally, these applications do not need functionality to access the files, but they inherit it from the operating system, and it's frequently weaponized that the use of this malicious content. And this is a huge risk reduction that doesn't require any knowledge of payload and can be implemented without impacting the user experience. So by virtue of the foundational pillar of endpoint security, which is protection against ransomware, just by enabling these policies, which are available as out-of-box policies, this enables a user to restrict content access only to legitimate applications such as Office and other productivity suites. And to configure this, all we need to know is the content handler that you are commonly using, which will be a shortlist of the trusted applications. Any undefined applications, including scripts, child processes, etc., will be prevented from tampering the content. And that way, enterprises can deploy the protection against ransomware in a very simple manner, but at the same time, having 100% security with the two fundamentals that we studied earlier: the removal of the local admin rights and application control, which has proven to be 100% successful with more than 3 million plus strands of ransomware, which have been tested by the solution provider in their labs. Last, but an important one, is about the audit compliance and the removal of the local admin rights. Finally, enforcing the least privilege. Comprehensive conditional policies based on application control helps us to create scenarios for every user group, from HR to DevOps. Application context, parameters, and attributes are considered to allow or block certain scripts, application, or operation. So in this demonstration, we are deploying the least privilege on the Mac, showcasing least privilege within the OS X environment. Similar to Windows, certain actions require admin rights. Creating a elevate system preference policy from the OS X, specify specific task which needs to be elevated. So in this demonstration, we are creating the policies to elevate the system preferences for the specific user doing the certain administrative actions on the endpoint, and then specifying specific tasks to elevate. And by saving these policies, selecting from the task and saving these policies, the policies get pushed down onto the endpoint. After application of these policies, when a user wants to run these tasks again, this time, the situation will be different. So once these policies are pushed, automatically gets refreshed, or they can be a hard push from the admin console. Now, when the user creates a task which can be fulfilled with the endpoint solution, elevating the user privileges at the backend. So for every admin activity, he doesn't have to go to the help desk, and that is where a lot of synergies can be created by your help desk team, having a good balance with what needs to be elevated or could be elevated in a self-elevation kind of policies, or what should be provisioned by the help desk team. So with this demonstration, Now we understood that how these foundational endpoint security solutions can help reduction in the cybersecurity risk, can help drive operational efficiencies, digital businesses, as well as do a lot justice to the admin and audit compliance needs for a particular enterprise. As the agenda for today, now let's look at the hands-on of using one such solution, which is CyberArk Endpoint Privilege Management Solution, to look at. Let me just share my browser with everyone. Now the login to this administrative console is for the administrator of the solution. The users do not require to log in into any console, but only the admin can log in and can go to the first aspect of pushing these onto the endpoints, pushing these agents onto the endpoint, wherein depending upon what profile the endpoint is, it's a Windows, Mac, Linux, these agents can be downloaded and pushed onto the endpoints. Again, both methods are available, whether manual pushing or through some SCCM solution, depends upon the choice of deployment. And as soon as these agents are pushed in, they start appearing in the inventory list of all the endpoints which are monitored through this solution. Now, in this case, what we are seeing as 3 agents being pushed. If the endpoints are live, they will be showing as live, otherwise disconnected. And with these agents being pushed, there are a lot of events that would start coming in because of the policies that had been put into the detection mode. We are going to look at the policies in some time. These events are nothing but the applications, the activities which are being done by the users on these endpoints, and all these can be segregated, filtered by the respective analysis team for the endpoint security. You can also see that for this particular application, as an example, fences.exe has got 320 events for this particular application onto the network. There is also an aspect of understanding the threat landscape of these applications, because today point solutions are not asked. Enterprises are looking for platform-based solutions which have a lot more capabilities, which we are again going to see in the maturity model of these solutions. But yes, integrations, as we discussed with the threat intelligence agencies like CyberArk, application reputation analysis, NSRL, virus total, and all of these exist to give a confidence that the analysis, the risk behavior of these applications can also be studied by virtue of the integration with these threat intelligence applications. Next, we go to the policies section and go to the default policies, wherein, as we discussed, the foundational endpoint security lies in putting the unhandled application into the detection and restriction mode. Protecting against ransomware by applying the right content handlers to access these applications is something that can definitely be enabled by the toggle of these options onto such solutions for endpoint security. Controlled access of these applications to internet, intranet, network shares, drives that we saw as part of the demonstration can also be done, so that these applications are not able to do any harm and move laterally within the organization. From a credential theft perspective, while there are policies like the browser-based enabling of policies so that none of the malicious applications are able to leach the credentials from these browsers, it can be put into the detection and block mode. There are aspects of putting credential layers in place as well, which can be harmful if an attacker or a malicious application is trying to access it. Additionally, removal of the local admin rights as the foundational endpoint security, as well as rotating the credentials of the local endpoints rather than the users or the help desk team having those credentials and with the same set of credentials across multiple endpoints. These can be rotated as well by virtue of many other solutions like privilege access management as an integration aspect to this. If we look at some of the policy recommendations, again, baselining from the applications that are seen onto these endpoints, there are policy recommendations that could also give a cue to the security teams to understand which all should be whitelisted and blacklisted as per the baselining application that are being seen in this environment. And finally, when we looked at some of the just-in-time policies being created for these users, there are policies which can be created for application, different kind of user-based policies, for example, the just-in-time policies that we saw as part of the demonstration. The privileged threat protection policy is very, very important in today's scenario around aspects of Windows credential harvesting or the IT application credential theft, wherein a lot of credentials are there in the applications. All these can be safeguarded just by enabling these policies and pushing them in an enable mode. Finally, as we already looked at the threat intelligence aspect, there is an aspect of having a audit control while the logs of the solution, and again, a lot of reports that could be made on top of those logs will give us a lot of intel. But yes, if we want to understand what transpired just before and after when these policies were triggered, if an action that hit a policy was being triggered, there are some policy audits and audit videos that could also be used from a forensic perspective or from an audit and compliance perspective. And to mention the reports, wherein a lot of events, a lot of reports could be based on events, the policies that have been pushed on from a audit and compliance perspective. So this is one solution wherein we feel that there's a lot of readiness around putting the foundational endpoint security controls. The security admin doesn't have to learn the coding, all is driven through the user interfaces. And yes, with many of these solutions like these can be replicated to deploy the use cases of foundation endpoint security that we looked at from the foundational endpoint security that should be deployed onto these endpoints. Now, with that hands-on exercise, this brings me to the third and the final portion of our agenda today, which is to understand the identity security maturity model. So as organizations think about building their own identity security program, there are two fundamental factors to consider in this tandem. One is the capability breadth, and second is the deployment depth. The identity security maturity model describes the breadth of the capabilities across tools, integrations, automation, and continuous threat detection and response. These capabilities and integrations organizations should strive to deliver to mitigate identity security risk. That guidance is supplemented by the blueprints which are provided by many security companies, which not only considers capability breadth, but also the deployment depth by aligning capabilities to specific resource and environments requiring identity security controls. While we may understand the organization capability breadth, it does not explicitly correlate to the depth in which these capabilities have been implemented across your environment. And for this reason, it is essential to consider the identity security maturity model and the blueprint together as organizations chart their course for security programs. While 38% of the novice organizations believe that they have made the correct identity related decisions, most organizations at this level have yet to invest in foundational identity security tools and lag in integrating and automating tools they do have in their environments. Existing controls tend to focus heavily on human identities, leaving third-party and non-human identities unmanaged. Generally, those organizations lack the confidence to mitigate identity-related risk promptly and are slow to respond to the audit request as well. So there's a clear gap between investment and outcomes at this level. 32% of the novice organizations have suffered 2 or more successful identity-related cyber attacks compared to just 7% of the most mature organizations. Those categorized as transformative, which is level 4. Many of these attacks stem from credential compromise and malware, to mention because of the endpoint foundational security controls, which are having some loopholes. Novice organizations point to fragmentation, insufficient staffing, and budget constraints as their major roadblocks, yet continue to forge ahead with cloud adoption that can significantly expose the attack surface area. And that brings the difference between being aware and actioning. The following are the key characteristics of identity security implementation with transformative organizations that drive the highest level of maturity. 1, 2 times more likely to deploy a platform rather than a collection of point tools. 2.4 times more likely to deploy purpose-built, deliverable, cloud deployed identity security solutions. 3.4 times more likely to have begun to implement zero trust strategies across the entire organization. And 2.8 times more likely to see securing DevOps, which is critical to secure the software supply chain initiatives in any organization. If we look at the transformative organizations with the most mature identity security strategy, which outperform peers in many ways, and those ways are 1.8 times less likely than novice organizations to be victims of successful identity related attack. 4.9 times more likely to be able to collect identity related data in audits in a matter of minutes. 2.6 times more likely to enable the IoT initiatives, and 2.5 times more likely to enable the cloud transformation. And that creates a divide between the mindset, the capabilities, and the tool set which can deliver their vision for a zero trust in these organizations and help move an organization from the novice to a transformative layer. The top considerations when evaluating identity security vendors are the ones that are addressed in the latest identity related issues, which are 1, roadmap functionality for top of mind needs, 2nd, knowledge of the industry, and 3rd, impact on cybersecurity team efficiency. So effectively, this means organizations are looking for trusted partners and vendors for expertise, experience, and support when tackling the future of security identity, rather than putting so many point solutions in place that at a point in time, the integration, the manageability of these point solutions becomes a problem for the organizations. While there are many more insights from this report, I would like to encourage the audience to explore today's innovations, including seeing demos and even testing these solutions firsthand, which are available through free trials and early availability programs. I also would want everyone to take a tour of the blueprint published by many OEMs for identity security success. And these are the best practices framework for how to reduce risk and phases over time. And in the wake of the events like the recent Uber bridge, it is mission critical to have a plan in place. And finally, have a grab on into this report, the holistic identity security maturity model published by the Enterprise Strategy Group in formulating an important fundamental strategy when building a plan that seeks to maximize the risk reduction and the impact. So with that, I conclude my session for today. We can open the floor for any questions or take questions if they're already posted onto the chat. Back to you, Yash.
Thanks, Manshu. I think there are 2 questions there in the chat window. One is asking that why don't we see any is there a guide on us to that how we can experience the chatbot powered by LLM?
Can you repeat that? How we can experience the chatbot part by
LLM?
The requester, can you just elaborate what is the acronym for LLM?
Yes, I think there might be a different question in the chat window. We can move on to the next question.
So,
How should we manage malicious code to be injected in an application in free text box?
okay, so this application code that you're talking about, the main intent is to stop this application code to run on the endpoint. While if this malicious code is already a part of the application, there are VAPT tools which can help understand what these actions are being done on the application when these code execute as part of the application which you are doing a vulnerability assessment. So that is where those fundamental solutions for particularly this use case are the VAPT tests which can be used. But if there is a malicious code which you are not aware of, which is somewhat coming from an unhandled application, if you want to stop the harm from that malicious code, yes, you should have these fundamental endpoint security tools to enable one, least privilege, and second is your application control, which will provide you security against this particular use case.
Sure. So I think more or less we don't have any other questions, Manshu. Maybe if you want to showcase any more further, because we still have got some time. So if you want to showcase some more demos, please feel free to do that.
I think we have comprehensively covered all the aspects of the need that arises for this fundamental endpoint security, multiple use cases that the problem can come with, and how do we ensure that we have the right tools in place to protect against those unexpected behavior, as well as a cue from some of these reports like the one that I'm highlighting is something that is going to give a broader view to how we can start thinking about what needs to be deployed rather than just jumping into the deployment of a solution which is just going to give us a relief from the current problem that we have at hand. So that way, I would say that do explore all these reports which are available, the blueprints which are available, which will give you a holistic view of what all could go wrong and how do we devise a methodology to put things in the right place with the fundamentals laid, so that while trying to solve the problem, we deploy solution 1, 2, and 3, and then the fourth one, when we go to deploy, we come at a standstill still because it doesn't get integrated with solution 1, 2, and 3.
Sure.
And then the problem aggravates. So that is where a holistic approach, a comprehensive approach should be taken by everybody as a conscious call to define a solutioning which is going to deliver you benefits in the longer run rather than just the point solutions in place.
Sure.
So,
Manshu, while you were discussing, I think another question came from a student. I think many of the students have also joined this workshop.
Yeah.
So they wanted to understand about the career prospects in primarily the specifically the PAM solutions. So they wanted to understand what are the career prospects, how they can build skills to enable themselves ready for the job market.
I think that's a good question, especially for people who are trying to prove their mettle into the cybersecurity field. And today we understand, because of the dynamic environment that we have, there are a lot of problems that also comes, because today everybody is not just working from office, it's a remote environment. Many tools are available for remote access and so on and so forth. And with those creeps the challenges as well. So yes, to start your journey in the cybersecurity domain, it is actually the right time to get into it, because there's a huge demand for cybersecurity professionals today. Maturity has to come from a resource perspective. Yes, I mean, similar to the lines what data analytics industry was 10 years back, we are at that stage right now. So it is the right time to get deeper into these tool set and technologies, especially the first pillar of the blueprint is around the privilege access management, specifically to the question that was asked. So it is the whole soul grain of what is being accessed in a controlled manner from an administrative perspective. There are good enough materials which are available in the open source around understanding what a PAM is, how to deploy PAM solutions, and how to think again from a future perspective that what all could be the problems that could come up in the life of an administrator. So I would recommend that be bold, be confident that yes, this industry is going to give you a lot in the next coming 5-10 years from a job career perspective. And there are many more facets of cybersecurity. Today we just focused on the endpoint security, but to mention privilege access management, ZTNA, are many other facets that could be ventured from a cybersecurity domain perspective.
So I think, Manshu, one final question has come up that how do we secure application which is hosted for public users when users are misusing and attacking the application usage?
How do we, can you just repeat that?
It is how do we secure the application which is hosted for public users when the users are misusing or maybe attacking the application usage?
Okay. So when these applications are being posted for public users, one is to protect these applications from the identity perspective. If these applications are providing certain kind of login credentials to the public customers as well, they should definitely be targeted to put behind some kind of single sign-on and multi-factor authentication solutions, so that just by let's say if in the unfortunate scenario by stealing the credentials, nobody is able to do a harm to this profile of the users. And that is where single sign-on and MFA solutions also play an important part in protecting the accesses to these applications, especially when they are being used by employees, workforce like you and me, or the external public when they are posted onto the public side. But yes, from the applications which are just like freely accessible, no customer logins are required, no profile logins are required, there are many other solutions like antiviruses, and all those solutions can definitely help to protect those servers on which these applications run.
So I think we are good then, Manshu. Thank you, Prasad and Manshu, for such valuable insights, for sharing such valuable insights with us. And thank you everyone for our participation. We would also like to thank our core committee members. You might be seeing them on screen shortly. They are a great pillar for us to help us stitch all this wonderful workshops together. And we would also like to thank our sponsors, platinum sponsors like EPAM Systems, ServiceNow, Entity Data, GitHub, R1RCM, gold sponsors, Global Logic, Colliers, lanyard sponsors, Total IT Solutions, skilling partner, Sector Skill Council and Future Skills Prime, and delegate back sponsors, NAV Back Office. With this, we conclude the day one of our hybrid conference. We hope you all had a great learning experience attending our informative workshops throughout the day. We would like to thank you all for participating and taking out time to attend these workshops. We look forward to having you tomorrow in our main conference, that is the in-person conference at Leela Ambience, Gurgaon. Thank you once again for joining in. Thank you, Manshu. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.